I have seen Natural England and government agencies, Ben, pull some stunts. But at the moment, I reckon these new documents, these new general licences, were not written by anybody with any form of countryside knowledge. Who in God's name would say that under protection of flora and fauna, that you cannot take rooks and jackdaws to preserve wild birds? It is a known fact that corvids will kill anything they can get their sticky little beaks into.
Falconer and pest controller Gary Baxter is not happy with the new general licences for England issued by DEFRA.
This is so funny. We can, so it says, protect endangered wild birds with nest cages to exclude target birds and prevent damage. Oh yes, we can cover up anything you like to protect it from magpie and jay, rook and jackdaw and carrion crow. Who in God's name has got the time to go round putting nest cages over songbirds' nests?
A lot of it is quite unworkable, but actually we, from the Alliance's perspective, are pretty pleased that DEFRA has issued these licenses rather than Natural England, that control has been taken away from Natural England, who had previously proved incompetent of delivering workable licenses. And we also feel that these do allow land managers, conservationists, gamekeepers to do the vast majority of their jobs. And one of the problems with grouse moors and our uplands is that so much of that is designated as a European protected site, which meant in the previous general licenses that they weren't applicable to European protected sites. You had to apply for an individual license.
There was a restriction around all of these sites and the 300-metre buffer zone. So that's gone now. If you read the licence, it says it applies everywhere, provided they stick to the rules, they've got the legitimate reason, they can rely on the general licence. They don't have to apply for the individual one. So it's better. It's definite improvement.
Some of the advice given in the licences appears to be aimed at children, such as explaining that physical objects like trees and buildings can be used as cover by keepers and pest controllers so they don't disturb rare birds at their nests.
The level of advice and guidance is exactly as you say, pretty condescending and often unworkable and unnecessary. But I think what we have to remember is that these licenses come from a place where DEFRA and Natural England have been continually challenged with the threat of legal action, and they therefore exist to try and close off all of those possible loopholes that come about through our adherence to the EU Birds and Habitats Directive.
I think that's a valid point about the advice. I think that's the important thing to remember with it, though. It is just advice. It's the conditions, so it's complying with the conditions. So there's a legal requirement, whether you're a gamekeeper, a farmer, whatever, not to intentionally or recklessly disturb a Schedule 1 bird. They've tried to be helpful. As you say, I'm not sure. A lot of people will read that and think, yes, this is as you just said, it's not written for somebody like me. But I suppose they've tried to be helpful. Let's leave it there, type thing on that.
Sam says the dumbed down detail is due to Wild Justice's judicial reviews, forcing DEFRA to make the licences understandable to everyone.
It really is a result of the judicial reviews that Wild Justice have threatened into the general licensing approach of DEFRA and Natural England. So that's why they seem very pedantic, very overburdened with absurd guidance that's attached to them, because they do need to cover off all of these legal avenues.
The new papers specifically name birds that can be targeted. Further details explain where certain protected birds are and exclusion zones around them. Gary sees these as unworkable.
How many people walk through the New Forest every summer? You have got now a 750 metre exclusion zone round a honey buzzard's nest. Does anybody know where a honey buzzard nests? Does anybody know what a honey buzzard nest look like? But you've got a 750 metre exclusion zone around it.
BASC's Glyn Evans explains the exclusion zones are simply another case of DEFRA going overboard in its explanations, and the area is simply places where you need to take extra care not to disturb rare birds.
If you took the SPA that's got a little turn that's listed on the licence, and that says 200 metres. So, for instance, if you had a little turn that was nesting right on the very edge of the site, that pushes the site out 200 metres, as it were, to tell you to be careful. That doesn't mean to say that you can't carry out control in that 200 metres. It tells you that beyond 200 metres, in effect, is a safe known working zone.
Last year, Gary's application for a gull pest control permit at a Norfolk factory that makes gear for the NHS was rejected despite the pandemic.
That site in Kings Lynn, Ben, is still producing membrane 7 days a week for surgical scrubs and gowns. If any of that material goes to waste because of bird damage, whose fault is it? I've done my bit. The government need to do theirs now.
He is about to apply for another individual licence to protect the factory, but it seems unlikely he will get it.
The issue with gulls is an enormous one, particularly that's where I think the biggest contradiction is, because they have arbitrarily capped the number of individual licenses that are available for gulls, and most of those are used up for protecting, as you say, urban areas or indeed around airports, and not for conservation purposes. Last year, Natural England issued almost no gull licenses, and we've received a letter this year, like everyone else, blaming COVID for an unprecedented workload and a diminished workforce, and that they don't foresee being able to issue many, if any, individual licenses this year. So our species of highest conservation concern in this country, the curlew, is likely to have another very tough breeding season.
Gulls are not the only birds missing from the new licences. DEFRA has dropped protection for green-listed birds, a move BASC and the Countryside Alliance say is a mistake.
That's something that I would have liked to have seen remain. I don't think it, for me, the licenses are about conserving birds, and for a bird to have to be in decline, in effect, to have to be amber or red listed, what could be happening is the efforts to conserve a green listed bird could be keeping it as green listed. So it seems to me a little bit counterintuitive that birds have to be at that level of decline.